My name is Denise Harper, and I'm 58 years old. Years ago, she destroyed my career and laughed while I packed my things in tears. I disappeared from that world broken, forgotten. But fate has a strange sense of humor. Because the next time she saw me, I was sitting in the chair she always wanted, interviewing her for a job she didn't deserve. She didn't recognize me at first, and I didn't remind her. I just smiled and let karma do the talking. If someone had told me that one person's laughter would echo through my mind for years, I wouldn't have believed them. I wasn't a woman who invited chaos into her life. I followed the rules, kept my head down, and believed that kindness and honesty would always count for something. For over 20 years, I worked as a senior administrative coordinator at a marketing firm called Bradford and Keene. It wasn't glamorous, but it was stable. And in my 50s, stability meant everything. When Samantha Gray joined the company, she was like a gust of fresh air, young, confident. With that kind of effortless charm people notice instantly. She greeted everyone with a bright smile, including me. In the beginning, I genuinely liked her. She asked me for advice, complimented my organization skills, and even brought me coffee some mornings. I thought she was someone I could mentor, maybe even a friend. I had no idea what she was capable of. The first red flag came small and quiet, like a whisper I ignored. A missing file here, an incorrect meeting schedule there. Each time, Samantha would giggle and apologize, brushing it off as a simple mistake. "Oh, Denise, I'm so sorry. I must have mixed up the folders," she'd say sweetly. I believed her. After all, we all make mistakes. But soon, those mistakes started to follow a pattern, always landing on my desk, always making me look careless. Rumors began spreading, subtle and sharp. People whispered that I couldn't keep up with new software, that I was outdated, that I was holding the department back. I overheard it once in the break room, the words slicing through me like paper cuts. "Denise means well, but she's stuck in the old ways," someone laughed. I recognized Samantha's voice among them. She started making jokes in meetings, nothing direct, but pointed enough that everyone knew who she was mocking. "You know, not everyone has adapted to technology," she'd say, smiling innocently while others chuckled. I tried to laugh along at first, pretending it didn't sting. But it did, deeply. The day that changed everything began like any other. I arrived early, prepped the conference room, and set up the projector for our weekly presentation. Samantha was supposed to display her marketing report, but somehow, the projector showed something else, an email I had sent privately to a colleague, venting about how overwhelmed I felt and how I didn't trust Samantha's intentions. My words were suddenly 10 feet tall, projected on the wall for everyone to read. The room went silent, then erupted in laughter. I remember my manager's raised eyebrow, the smirks, the whispers. I froze in my seat, my heart pounding so hard I thought I'd faint. Across the table, Samantha covered her mouth, pretending to look shocked, but her eyes told another story. There was satisfaction there, pure, cold satisfaction. After the meeting, I tried to explain that it was a mistake, that someone must have accessed my emails, but the damage was done. My manager called me into his office and said the team's morale was suffering because of my emotional instability. Within a month, I was demoted, stripped of responsibilities I'd carried for years. I became the person no one trusted, the joke they whispered about behind their screens. I'd worked so hard to build a reputation of reliability, and in a few weeks, it was gone. Samantha had not only humiliated me, she had orchestrated my fall perfectly. Looking back, I could see it so clearly. Every smile, every compliment, every mistake had been part of her plan. On my last day in that office, I sat at my desk surrounded by the things that once defined my professional life: framed certificates, neatly labeled folders, a few farewell cards with polite signatures. As I packed them into a small cardboard box, Samantha appeared behind me. She leaned against my cubicle wall, arms folded, that same practiced smile on her lips. "You should have retired sooner, Denise," she said softly, her tone almost sympathetic. But her eyes gleamed with cruelty. I didn't respond. I just looked at her, memorizing that smirk. Something inside me shifted at that moment. The humiliation hardened into something sharper, steadier. I didn't know how or when, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty: I would rise again. And when I did, she would see what it felt like to be on the other side of the laughter. That was the day I silently swore Samantha Gray would regret ever underestimating me. Losing my job broke something inside me that I didn't even know could break. I was 53, and suddenly, every door I knocked on seemed to close before I even finished introducing myself. Companies didn't want experience anymore. They wanted youth, quick energy, and someone who could be molded into their image. I was labeled too seasoned, overqualified, or my personal favorite, nearing retirement age. It didn't matter that I had decades of loyalty and discipline behind me. None of it counted. For months, my mornings started the same way. I'd wake up early, brew my coffee out of habit, and sit at my kitchen table with my laptop open, scrolling through job listings that never seemed to fit. I sent out application after application, each tailored carefully, each filled with hope that this one might be different. But the responses were always polite rejections. Some didn't bother replying at all. With every email that began with "We appreciate your interest," a little more of my confidence eroded. Money became tight faster than I anticipated. My savings, the one thing I had prided myself on maintaining, started disappearing bit by bit. First, I let go of the cleaning service I used occasionally. Then the cable subscription. Then my car. Selling it was the hardest. It wasn't just a vehicle, it was my independence. I traded freedom for survival. When rent became unbearable, I moved into a smaller apartment on the outskirts of the city. The rooms were quiet, the air cold, and the silence almost unbearable. My daughter, Megan, called me often, her voice full of concern. "Mom, are you eating properly? Do you need help with anything?" I always said no, even when the fridge was nearly empty. She had 2 children, a mortgage, and a husband working long hours. I couldn't bring myself to add to her worries. I told her I was fine, that I was enjoying my time off, even though I felt like a ghost in my own life. Depression doesn't hit you like a storm. It seeps in quietly, like a slow leak. Days began blending into each other. I'd catch my reflection in the mirror and barely recognize the woman staring back, tired eyes, unwashed hair, and a weight of hopelessness that clung to me like a second skin. I'd always believed hard work was enough, that effort could fix anything. But now, it felt like I had become invisible, discarded by a world that only valued speed and youth. At night, I couldn't sleep. I'd lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, and hear Samantha's laughter echoing in my mind. That awful, mocking sound haunted me, a reminder of how effortlessly she had dismantled everything I had built. I'd replay that day in my head, the humiliation, the whispers, the smirk on her face as I carried that small cardboard box out of the building. Sometimes I wondered if she ever thought of me at all. Probably not. For her, it was just another victory. One afternoon, as I scrolled aimlessly through LinkedIn, I froze. There it was, an announcement celebrating Samantha Gray's promotion to Senior Administrative Director, my old position, the one she had taken from me. The comments beneath it were filled with praise. "Well deserved, a true leader. Congratulations, Samantha." My chest tightened as I read each word. I realized then that her betrayal had never been accidental. She had planned it, step by step, waiting for the perfect moment to push me out and take my place. For a while, I let that anger consume me. I didn't have the strength to fight back, but I also couldn't move on. Until one morning, as I was cleaning out old files, I found a notebook I used to keep for work ideas, project outlines, goals, management tips. I flipped through it, reading my own handwriting, and something inside me stirred. The woman who had once been confident and capable was still there, buried beneath the exhaustion and fear. That night, I made a decision. If no one would hire me, I would rebuild myself. I enrolled in an online business management program. The enrollment fee took nearly everything I had left, but I didn't care. For the first time in years, I had direction again. Classes were hard, and technology had evolved in ways that made me feel ancient, but I pushed through. Every completed assignment reminded me I wasn't done yet. Months passed, and I began to feel a spark of life again. I studied late into the night, fueled by coffee and determination. I wasn't chasing revenge, not yet. I was chasing redemption. I wanted to prove, at least to myself, that I still had value, that experience and resilience still mattered. The day I submitted my final project, I sat back and closed my eyes, overwhelmed with emotion. I had done it. I had finished something I started for me, not for a paycheck, not for approval. Just as I was about to shut down my laptop, a new email, notification appeared. The subject line read, Leadership Training Invitation, Hartridge Innovations. My pulse quickened as I opened it. They wanted me to apply for a 6-month executive mentorship program, something prestigious, something that could change everything. For the first time in years, I smiled. Maybe fate wasn't done with me yet. When I received the acceptance email from Hartridge Innovations, I sat staring at the screen for nearly 10 minutes, unsure whether to laugh or cry. The company's 6-month leadership training program for mid-career women felt like a golden ticket, a chance to prove that my best years weren't behind me. Still, when I walked into the sleek glass building on the first day, nerves twisted in my stomach. The room was filled with women in their 30s, dressed sharply, speaking confidently, their words sprinkled with corporate buzzwords that made me feel ancient. For a fleeting moment, I considered walking out. But then I remembered the version of myself that Samantha had laughed at the broken woman packing her box in silence. I wasn't going to let that woman define me anymore. The first few weeks were grueling. The technology felt foreign, the discussions fast-paced, and I constantly worried I'd say something outdated or irrelevant. But I realized something early on. I didn't have to compete with their energy. I had wisdom, years of real-world problem-solving that no textbook could teach. Slowly, I started speaking up, contributing insights drawn from experience. My points carried weight, and for the first time in years, I saw respect in people's eyes when I spoke. That was when I met Clara Jennings, my assigned mentor. She was in her early 60s, sharp as a blade yet kind in her delivery. During one of our first one-on-one sessions, she looked me straight in the eye and said, "Denise, your hesitation isn't lack of skill, it's leftover doubt. You've already led, you just forgot." What that felt like. Those words stuck with me. Under her guidance, I began to push myself harder, not out of fear but determination. I volunteered for leadership simulations, tackled complex management analytics, and surprised even myself with how naturally I adapted. My instructors praised my calm under pressure, my ability to empathize with teams, and my precision in decision-making. By the 4th month, Clara suggested I apply for an internal operations manager role that had opened within Hartridge. The idea terrified me, but she insisted. "You've rebuilt your foundation," she said. "Now it's time to build your walls." I applied hesitantly, and when the offer letter arrived, I stared at it through tears. For the first time since my fall from Bradford and Keene, I felt genuinely proud of myself. The next few years moved like chapters of a book I had written for myself. I poured everything into my work, long hours, honest leadership, and a quiet promise to never allow a deceit to flourish under my watch. My dedication paid off. Promotions followed, operations manager, then senior operations manager, and eventually division director. Each new title didn't just symbolize success, it symbolized redemption. I'd gone from broken to rebuilt, from discarded to indispensable. But my transformation wasn't just professional. I became someone my younger colleagues looked up to. Many confided in me about their struggles with manipulative coworkers or unfair treatment. I listened and mentored them with honesty, reminding them to trust their instincts and never let someone else dictate their worth. I wanted to be the mentor I never had, the one who would have told me, back when Samantha was tearing me down, to stand my ground. Hartridge Innovations became more than just my workplace. It became a stage for the woman I had fought to become. I had built a reputation for fairness, strength, and empathy, qualities that set me apart from people like Samantha. For a long time, I believed I had left that part of my past behind. But life, it seems, has a strange way of circling back when you least expect it. It was an ordinary Wednesday afternoon when I was reviewing recruitment requests for a new regional project manager. I was sipping my coffee, scanning through resumes, half distracted by an upcoming board presentation. Then my eyes landed on a familiar name, Samantha Gray. For a moment, I thought it was a coincidence, someone else sharing her name. But the credentials matched, the previous companies listed aligned perfectly, and then I saw it: Bradford and Keene. The world seemed to still around me. I leaned back in my chair, my breath catching in my throat. There it was, after all these years, the name that had once haunted me, now sitting in my inbox, asking for an opportunity. My mind raced with memories, the laughter, the humiliation, the whispered mockery, but beneath all that, there was something else now: control. Fate had brought Samantha right to my doorstep, and for the first time, I wasn't the one trembling. I was the one with the power to decide how this story would unfold. I sat at my desk, staring at the resume on my screen for a long time. There it was, her name, bold and unmistakable: Samantha Gray. My pulse quickened, not out of fear, but something else, something sharp and cold. She had moved around quite a bit over the years, never staying at one company for too long. Her resume was polished, full of buzzwords and carefully framed achievements, but to me it read like a pattern of chaos disguised as success. The same manipulative charm that had fooled me once was still there, hiding between lines of strategic innovation and team optimization. I couldn't help but smirk. Some things never change. For several minutes, I debated what to do. A part of me wanted to delete her application and move on, to erase her from my professional world just as she had once erased me from hers. But another part, the stronger one, wanted something more. I wanted her to see me, to look me in the eye and realize that the woman she once humiliated was now the one sitting in power. That thought alone was intoxicating. I picked up the phone and told my assistant to schedule her interview for Friday morning. The days leading up to it felt surreal. I went about my usual meetings, keeping my composure. But inside, anticipation coiled like a spring. I imagined her walking into my office, her confident stride faltering the moment our eyes met. I wasn't seeking revenge for the sake of cruelty. I wanted something cleaner, something poetic. I wanted her to face what she had created. When Friday arrived, I was ready. My office was calm, sunlight streaming through the large window behind me, casting a glow across the glass table where she would soon sit. I reviewed her file one last time, then heard the faint knock at the door. My assistant peeked in. "Miss Gray is here for her interview." "Send her in," I said evenly. And then she walked in, still impeccably dressed, still radiating that self-assured confidence that used to make people orbit around her. She carried herself like someone expecting to impress. But when her gaze lifted and landed on me, everything about her shifted. Her steps slowed, her posture stiffened, and for a split second, the color drained from her face. "Denise?" she stammered, forcing a weak smile. I didn't know you worked here." I held her gaze, calm and unshaken. "Oh, I don't just work here, Samantha," I replied, my tone steady, almost kind. "I'm the division director." The silence that followed was delicious. She blinked rapidly, trying to collect herself, and then put on that familiar mask of charm. "Wow, congratulations. That's incredible." "Thank you," I said, gesturing to the chair opposite me. "Please, have a seat." The interview began like any other, but the air between us was thick with unspoken history. I asked about her experience, her leadership style, and how she handled team conflict. Her answers were smooth, rehearsed, almost too perfect until I pressed further. I asked specific technical questions about projects she had supposedly led. Her confidence began to waver. She stumbled through answers, her voice tight, her eyes darting around as if searching for an escape. Every time she tried to charm her way back into control, I stayed composed, nodding thoughtfully, never giving her the satisfaction of emotional reaction. It was strange how easy it felt to hold the upper hand now. Years ago, she had dismantled me piece by piece in front of my colleagues. Today, without raising my voice or losing my composure, I was dismantling her illusions. At one point, she laughed nervously and said, This feels so strange, us sitting here like this after all these years. It's good to see you've recovered. I smiled faintly. You could say that. I replied, my tone unreadable. She looked uncertain for the first time. For all her confidence, she couldn't quite tell what I was thinking. And that unnerved her. When the interview ended, she stood, straightening her blazer, forcing another polite smile. Thank you for your time, Denise, she said, her voice softer now. Of course, I replied, standing as well. We'll be in touch. After she left, I remained standing by the window, watching her walk down the hallway. My assistant entered quietly, a knowing expression on her face. So, she asked, should I mark her as rejected? I turned back to my desk and glanced at the file still open on the screen. No, I said after a pause. She'll get the job. My assistant looked surprised. You're hiring her? Oh, yes, I said, signing the approval form. I just need everyone else to see who she really is first. As the ink dried on the paper, I felt the first stirrings of satisfaction, not of the stirring, vengeance, but of justice setting itself into motion. The woman who once thought she could break me was about to walk straight into a world where I decided the rules. And this time, I was ready. Samantha joined Hartridge Innovations 2 weeks later, and as fate would have it, she was assigned directly under my supervision. I could tell she didn't quite know how to handle it. The moment she stepped into my office for orientation, her confidence flickered for a fraction of a second before she smoothed her expression into that familiar professional smile. I'm really looking forward to working with you again, Denise, she said lightly, as if our history was a small footnote instead of the foundation of everything she'd taken from me years ago. I returned the smile, calm and unbothered. I'm sure we'll accomplish great things together, I replied, already knowing this time would be different. At first, Samantha played her role well. She was polite, attentive, and eager to impress. She brought me coffee in the mornings, complimented my leadership style in front of others, and occasionally left notes on my desk thanking me for my mentorship. It was a performance, a well-rehearsed act to gain favor. I had seen this side of her before, the charm, the flattery, the illusion of cooperation, and I knew exactly what would follow once she thought I'd let my guard down. True to form, it didn't take long. Within a month, her real personality began to surface. She started making subtle comments about other team members, questioning their competence in ways that sounded like concern but were laced with poison. She took credit for small successes that weren't hers, rephrased others' ideas as her own in meetings, and began building small alliances with employees she could manipulate. It was the same old pattern, only this time, I was the one with the upper hand. I didn't confront her immediately. That would have been too easy and too soon. Instead, I watched and waited, collecting the pieces as she built her own downfall. My assistant, Lydia, noticed it before I even mentioned anything. There's something off about her. She told me one afternoon after a meeting. I could hear the frustration in her voice. She twists things around, makes people doubt themselves. I smiled faintly and replied, keep your eyes open, document anything unusual. Lydia nodded, and from that day on, she became my quiet ally. Over the next few weeks, I started compiling evidence emails that contradicted her claims, notes from HR about minor complaints, and witness statements from employees she'd subtly undermined. Nothing drastic, nothing obvious, just small threads of truth that, once woven together, would reveal the full picture. Samantha, meanwhile, grew bolder. She bragged casually in the break room about how being assertive was the only way to climb the ladder. I overheard her once telling a colleague, "You just have to know how to make people believe they need you. That's how you win." It was the same philosophy she had used years ago to destroy me. But now, she was speaking those words under my roof, unaware that every move she made was being recorded, tracked, and witnessed. Her undoing came during a major quarterly presentation, a project that was supposed to showcase teamwork and innovation. A quiet, talented junior analyst named Rachel had spent weeks preparing the proposal. She was new, nervous, and eager to make a good impression, Samantha had been supervising her, which in hindsight was the perfect trap Samantha unknowingly set for herself. When presentation day arrived, I took my seat at the head of the conference table, watching as Samantha confidently connected her laptop to the projector. The first slide appeared, and I recognized Rachel's layout instantly. As she began to speak, my suspicion turned to certainty. Every detail, every chart, every carefully written sentence belonged to Rachel. And yet Samantha presented it as if it were entirely her own. I kept my expression neutral, letting her dig herself deeper with each slide. When she finally concluded, she smiled smugly, expecting praise. "Impressive work," I said calmly. "But before we continue, would you like to explain whose work that really was?" The room went silent. The sound of the projector humming filled the tension between us. Samantha froze, her confident smile faltering. Her eyes darted toward Rachel, who sat stiffly in her chair, visibly shocked. I don't know what you mean," Samantha stammered, trying to regain control. "Oh, I think you do," I replied evenly. "Because I reviewed the project drafts last week, and the metadata in your version still lists Rachel as the original author." A murmur spread across the room. Samantha's face drained of color, her usual composure evaporating as she searched for a response. "It was a collaboration," she muttered weakly. "Collaboration?" I repeated. Interesting, considering Rachel wasn't even aware it was being presented today. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. No one moved, no one spoke. Samantha's hands trembled slightly as she closed her laptop. I didn't need to say anything more. Her exposure had been clean, undeniable, and public. The meeting ended in awkward quiet, and as people filed out, I caught the look on Rachel's face, a mix of relief and gratitude. Samantha, however, couldn't meet my eyes. She hurried out, her usual confidence replaced by panic. I watched her go, feeling no triumph, only the quiet satisfaction of truth finally surfacing. Later that afternoon, HR called me in for a confidential discussion. Apparently, multiple employees had come forward after the meeting, sharing incidents that mirrored what I had already documented. They said Samantha had been creating a toxic environment, taking credit for others' work, and spreading false rumors. The HR director looked uneasy as she handed me the file. "We're opening a formal review of her conduct," she said. "And given her reporting structure, we'd like you to lead the investigation." I took the folder, the weight of poetic justice settling in my hands. "Of course," I replied quietly. "I'll handle it." As I walked back to my office, I couldn't help but think about the irony. Years ago, Samantha had turned my workplace into a stage for my humiliation. Now, the stage belonged to me, and she had just given her first performance in her own downfall. The moment HR handed me the file, I knew this was going to be more than just an administrative review. It was a reckoning. Still, I reminded myself of one crucial rule: I had to stay professional. This wasn't about personal revenge. It was about justice, fairness, and truth. I would do what I wished someone had done for me years ago. So, I began the investigation methodically, with the same precision I'd brought to every major project in my career. I wasn't Denise, the woman Samantha once humiliated. I was Denise Harper, division director, responsible for upholding integrity in my department. I started by reviewing the complaints. Each report painted the same disturbing picture patterns of manipulation, deceit, and quiet cruelty. Samantha had been targeting younger women, subtly undermining their confidence just as she had once done to me. There were accounts of her reassigning credit, dismissing ideas in meetings, spreading rumors about coworkers, and isolating anyone who challenged her authority. Reading through the statements, I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. It was eerie, like looking into a distorted reflection of my own past. She hadn't changed at all. She had only refined her tactics. I spent days interviewing employees, some nervous, others visibly relieved to finally be heard. One young analyst, barely in her mid-20s, broke down halfway through her statement. "I didn't want to say anything," she whispered, her voice trembling. She made me feel like I was the problem. I handed her a tissue and said softly, "You're not the problem. You did the right thing by speaking up." Each testimony added another layer to the case, each voice echoing the same sentiment: fear, manipulation, and emotional exhaustion. As I compiled the evidence, I was careful to keep my emotions in check, though it wasn't easy. Every cruel comment or story mirrored something Samantha had done to me years ago. It was as if time had folded back on itself, bringing me face to face with the ghosts I'd long buried. But I didn't let anger guide me this time. I let the truth do that. I organized the reports, cross-referenced timelines, and gathered undeniable proof: emails, messages, and timestamps that exposed her lies. There was no room for her to twist the story. Once everything was in order, I scheduled a private meeting with her. I remember the look on her face when she walked into my office that morning. She tried to mask her anxiety with that same polished confidence, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. "You wanted to see me?" she asked casually, closing the door behind her. "Yes, Samantha, have a seat," I said, keeping my tone even. I waited until she settled before sliding a folder across the desk. "I think we need to discuss some concerns that have come up." She flipped the folder open and glanced through the documents. I watched her eyes move quickly, her posture straightening as she realized what she was looking at. Screenshots, reports, direct quotes from employees. For a brief moment, her mask cracked. Then she let out a small, dismissive laugh. "Is this really necessary, Denise? You're being too sensitive, like always." I leaned forward slightly. "I'm not being sensitive, Samantha. I'm being thorough. You've been accused of workplace misconduct, manipulation, and unethical behavior, and the evidence supports those claims." She scoffed and tried to compose herself. "Come on, Denise. You and I both know how people exaggerate. They can't handle strong leadership. You, of all people, should understand that." Her attempt at camaraderie almost made me laugh. She thought she could still pull me into her web. I opened the folder wider, showing her a printed email thread. "This," I said calmly, "isn't an exaggeration. It's your email sent to Lydia, belittling another employee in writing. It's dated, time-stamped, and corroborated by 3 witnesses." The color drained from her face. Denise, please. This doesn't have to get messy. We can talk this out." I met her gaze steadily. "You taught me something valuable years ago," I said quietly. "Actions always come back around. You built your career on lies, and now the truth is simply catching up." For a moment, the confident Samantha Gray vanished. What sat before me was a frightened woman who finally realized the walls were closing in. She opened her mouth, perhaps to beg again, but I stopped her gently. "You'll have the opportunity to explain yourself during the disciplinary hearing. HR will be in touch to schedule it." She looked at me in disbelief. "A hearing? Denise, that's unnecessary. This could ruin me." I stood, signaling the meeting was over. "Then you should have thought of that before you ruined others." She didn't respond. Her eyes darted to the papers again before she slowly rose and left my office, her heels clicking softly against the floor. I watched her go without satisfaction, only a heavy sense of finality. Later that day, HR confirmed the details of the hearing. They decided it would take place the following week in front of the department. Normally, such matters were handled privately, but given the extent of her misconduct and the number of people affected, transparency was deemed necessary. I agreed completely. People needed to see the truth for themselves, to know that leadership didn't turn a blind eye anymore. When the official meeting invite went out that afternoon, I passed by Samantha's office. She was sitting at her desk, staring at her computer screen. Her hand trembled slightly as she clicked through her emails. I didn't need to see her reaction to know when she found the calendar notice. The blood must have drained from her face because, for the first time since she joined Hartridge, she didn't look composed. She looked afraid. For years, she had thrived on control, controlling others, controlling perceptions, controlling outcomes. But now, that control was slipping away, and she knew there was nothing she could do to stop it. As I walked back to my office, a quiet sense of calm washed over me. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just ready for the truth to be seen in the light she had always avoided. The morning of the hearing arrived with a strange stillness in the air. Even before I stepped into the building, I could sense the tension humming through the corridors. People spoke in hushed tones, their eyes darting toward the large conference room where everything would unfold. HR had made sure every department head and team leader was present. It wasn't just a disciplinary hearing anymore, it was a reckoning that the entire office had been anticipating. As I walked toward the room, I caught sight of Samantha standing near the doorway. Her usual confident posture was gone. Her shoulders were tight, and her eyes avoided mine. She knew what was coming, even if she still hoped to escape it somehow. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with anticipation. Every employee who had once been a victim of Samantha's games sat quietly, hands clasped, eyes steady. They weren't here for revenge, they were here for closure. I took my seat at the head of the table, flanked by the HR director and a legal representative. Samantha sat across from me, visibly restless, her manicured fingers tapping against the table as though the rhythm could steady her nerves. The HR director began the session formally, reading the procedural statements, outlining the purpose of the review, and summarizing the allegations. Samantha's jaw tightened with every word. I sat silently, observing her, waiting for the moment my turn would come. When it did, I took a slow breath, opened the file in front of me, and began presenting the results of the investigation. My voice was calm, measured, and clear. I spoke only in facts, dates, incidents, evidence, and testimonies. Each sentence I read peeled away another layer of Samantha's carefully maintained facade. Her reputation, built on manipulation and deceit, began to crumble before everyone's eyes. The room was silent except for the sound of my voice and the faint shuffle of papers as I moved from one piece of evidence to the next. Halfway through, Samantha snapped. "This is ridiculous," she shouted, rising from her seat. "You're twisting everything. These are lies, jealous people trying to tear me down because I'm better at my job." Her voice trembled, but it wasn't conviction, it was desperation. "Miss Gray," the HR director interrupted firmly, "please remain seated. You'll have a chance to respond after the presentation." Samantha glared at her before reluctantly sitting down. I continued, unshaken, and displayed copies of the emails she'd sent, proof of her falsified reports, and testimonies from colleagues she had bullied. Every piece of evidence was undeniable. When I revealed the documentation of the project she had stolen from Rachel, the young analyst, a collective gasp filled the room. Rachel sat quietly in the corner, her hands clasped tightly together, tears glistening in her eyes. It was vindication, painful, but necessary. Samantha's eyes darted around the room, searching for someone, anyone to defend her. But she was met with blank stares. The same people she had manipulated and intimidated now saw her clearly. Her power had evaporated, leaving nothing but the truth. "This is a witch hunt," she hissed, her tone lower now. Brittle. "You're all against me." I closed the file gently, letting the silence stretch for a moment before I spoke. "No, Samantha. This isn't about vengeance. This is about accountability. You built your success by tearing others down, but that kind of foundation doesn't last forever." Her lips parted, as if she might argue again. But no words came. The HR director cleared her throat and looked at me for the final decision. I stood slowly, meeting Samantha's gaze. "Effective immediately," I said clearly. "Your employment with Hartridge Innovations is terminated." The words hung in the air like a verdict. For a long moment, there was only silence. Then came the faint murmur of whispers from around the table. Samantha sat frozen, disbelief written across her face. "You can't do this to me," she said finally, her voice cracking. "You don't have that kind of power." I held her gaze, my voice steady. "Actually, Samantha, I just did." Her chair screeched across the floor as she stood abruptly. She looked around the room one last time, her expression twisting between rage and humiliation. "You'll regret this," she spat. But even she didn't sound convinced. No one responded. No one stopped her. She turned sharply and stormed out of the room, slamming the glass door behind her. The sound echoed through the building, sharp and final. It was poetic. In a way, years ago, she had laughed as I left an office just like this, broken and humiliated. Now, the roles had reversed completely. When the door stopped rattling, silence filled the room once more. Every employee sat in stunned stillness, processing what they had just witnessed. Some exchanged glances, others looked down at their notes, but all of them turned their attention to me. Their eyes held a mix of gratitude, relief, and curiosity. They were waiting not for another announcement, but for what I would say next. I looked around at their faces, the faces of people who had endured months of quiet torment under Samantha's reign. I saw the weight lifting from their shoulders, the unspoken understanding that things would finally be different now. I felt the familiar surge of emotion rise within me, not triumph, but peace. I straightened my posture and prepared to speak, knowing that whatever I said next would set the tone for everything that followed. The moment was heavy, suspended in stillness, as every pair of eyes in the room fixed on me. For a few long seconds after Samantha stormed out, the entire conference room stayed completely silent. It wasn't the silence of shock anymore. It was the silence that comes when tension finally dissolves. I looked around at the faces of my team, strong, loyal people who had weathered months of manipulation, uncertainty, and self-doubt under her presence. What I saw in their eyes wasn't gloating or celebration. It was relief, freedom, the kind that only comes after walking through a storm. I took a deep breath and let my gaze move slowly across the room. "No one here," I said quietly, "should ever be afraid to come to work." For a moment, no one moved. Then someone clapped. Another followed. Soon, the entire room erupted in applause, not loud or wild, but heartfelt. It wasn't for me. It was for what that moment represented. An end to fear. A fresh start. When the sound finally faded, I gave them a small, genuine smile and said, "Let's get back to doing what we do best." The meeting dispersed, but the energy that lingered was lighter, almost hopeful. People lingered near the doorway, thanking me softly, expressing gratitude not with grand words but with quiet nods and teary eyes. When I returned to my office, I closed the door gently behind me and finally let out the breath I had been holding for years. My reflection in the glass wall caught my eye, the same woman, but not really. Gone was the Denise Harper who once walked out of her old office humiliated and broken. In her place stood a woman rebuilt from ashes, a woman who had faced her demons and refused to let them win. For the first time in a long time, I felt completely still. Not victorious, not angry, just free. I sat down and allowed myself to feel everything that had led to this moment. Every sleepless night, every tear shed, every job rejection, every class I took to rebuild my confidence, it all led here. The universe has a strange way of balancing things, I thought. Karma doesn't always strike loudly or violently. Sometimes it moves quietly, letting time do its work until the truth exposes itself naturally. Samantha's downfall wasn't something I orchestrated out of cruelty, it was simply her actions catching up to her. Later that evening, as I prepared to head home, my phone buzzed with a new message. When I saw the sender's name, I froze for just a second. Samantha Gray. I hesitated before opening it, unsure if I even wanted to read whatever she had to say, but curiosity got the better of me. The message was short, only 2 words: "You won." I stared at it for a long while, the irony settling deep in my chest. Once, that message would have filled me with satisfaction, maybe even triumph. But now, I only felt calm. Slowly, I typed back, "No, Samantha. I just learned." Then I set my phone aside, knowing that would be the last exchange we would ever have. And for the first time, I felt no bitterness, only closure. The following months brought a quiet transformation within the office. Without Samantha's toxicity shadowing the hallways, people began to shine again. Lydia took charge of new projects with confidence. Rachel, the young analyst Samantha had tried to exploit, received a promotion that she more than deserved. I made it my mission to recognize talent where it had been overlooked, to lift those who had been silenced or underestimated. I realized that leadership wasn't about authority, it was about creating safety, trust, and opportunity. Every morning, I arrived at the office to see genuine smiles and hear laughter that didn't sound forced. It was a small but powerful reminder of how much one person's attitude could impact an entire workplace. I held on to that lesson tightly, not as a weapon but as wisdom. I had learned the hard way that success without empathy is empty, and power without integrity is poison. One evening, as I was finishing up a report, my phone rang. It was my daughter, Megan. "Mom," she said, her voice bright and warm, "I just wanted to say I've never been prouder of you. I read that article the company published about your leadership. You really turned things around." Her words caught me off guard. For a moment, I couldn't even speak. All I managed to say was, "Thank you, sweetheart. That means more than you know." After hanging up, I stood by my office window, gazing at the city lights shimmering below. The reflection of my office surrounded me, the glass walls, the calm atmosphere, the life I had rebuilt through perseverance. I thought about that day years ago when I left my old job in humiliation, holding a small box of my belongings and swallowing tears. The same woman who once walked away defeated was now standing in a corner office, leading with strength and grace. As the evening sky deepened into shades of gold and blue, I whispered softly to myself, "She laughed when she ruined my life, but now I decide who stays." The words weren't bitter, they were peaceful, like an acknowledgement of balance restored. That night, as I locked my office and walked toward the elevator, I carried no resentment. What I felt was something far greater, a sense of dignity reclaimed, a deep belief that no cruelty, no betrayal, could ever define who I was again. It was never about revenge. It was about redemption. In the end, I realized karma isn't loud. It doesn't arrive with fireworks or vengeance. It comes quietly, in the form of truth revealed, strength rediscovered, and peace finally earned. And standing there, I understood what karma really feels like. It feels like freedom. In the end, I realized karma doesn't rush, it waits for the right moment to arrive quietly. What Samantha took from me wasn't my career, it was my confidence, and I took that back. I didn't need revenge. I needed peace. And I found it in my own strength. Life came full circle, and when it did, I stood taller, not bitter, just wiser. Sometimes, the sweetest justice is simply becoming everything they said you couldn't be. If this story made you feel that karma always finds its way, then maybe it's time more people heard it. Share it with someone who believes quiet strength isn't power enough. And before you go, tell me honestly, if life ever handed you the chance to face the person who once broke you, would you forgive them, or let karma speak for you?